it must also be in harmony with the command of God and with the way of life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So you cannot say, because I have good intention, so let me do this thing whether it is right or wrong. The thing itself must be right. You can't go stealing to give charity, because stealing itself is bad. All right? Okay, yes?
I want actually to ask you how to build an Islamic country in 1, 2, 3 points.
1, 2, 3 points. Okay, you're not going to allow me 10, huh? How to build an Islamic country in 1, 2, 3 points. Well, it seems to me that the basis of an Islamic country will be the people who are going to live in that country. The way in which the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, received this revelation is that initially the revelation just spoke about the faith, like people should be imbued with the faith. And once they were imbued with the faith, that's when the regulations came to be given. And the regulations that refer to a state can only come when you have the state. So, and the state can only come when you have a believing community. So that's where we start. We start with the community educating, intensifying the faith. And when it reaches a certain threshold, that's when you can say, okay, now we can formulate ourselves as a community to be governed by the Islamic teachings, because everyone accepts that. But you cannot have a community that do not want the Islamic teachings and then you come to impose it on them. That's not the way to formulate an Islamic state. That's only the way to cause rebellion and more chaos. Yes?
We always say and we always hear that Islam is a complete code of conduct of life. But whenever we see in our communities, like I'm talking about the concept of Sunnah, when we see in our social life and our economic life that Islamic principles are not followed, and it's like we are stick to the faith itself, like 5 pillars of Islam that we are stick individually, we are stick to those pillars of Islam. But in practical, like in socio-economic situations, we just forget these things. Are we not, my 2 questions related, are we not following the footsteps of other religions? Like sometimes in Christianity, there were times when rules were like under influence of churches. Like they were like religion has influence on the rules and government. And secondly, what can an individual can do to build up a socio-economic situation or socio-economic society by following the Islamic rules?
I'm not sure if I get you like completely, but I feel that you're asking about the fact that we often think of following the Sunnah of the Prophet, peace be upon him, in minor things, but we neglect some of the major things, like in terms of economics and politics. And in those things, we seem to be following some non-Muslim practices. Is that what you're...
Yeah, a part of this, but it's also that day by day, the Islam is becoming an individual matter. Okay. Like we pray, we fast, we perform Hajj. It's like only the faith. Like when it comes to the society, we don't, in many countries in our society, riba is not banned. Like there are not Islamic rules, and there are rules that are contradictory to Islam, and we just follow those rules. So, are we not following the footsteps of other religions, like I said, Christianity, that ultimately leads to a personal freedom, like we are witnessing today here in this part of the world?
Okay. So, to look through this, we should distinguish between Muslims living in a Muslim state and Muslims living as a minority. Muslims living in a Muslim state would have the obligation, at least the state would have the obligation, to implement all of the rules that govern an Islamic state. Muslims living as a minority will not have that obligation because they don't have the state. To put it simply, one can easily understand that a Muslim who does not have the means to perform the Hajj is not required to perform the Hajj. Though we cannot deny that Hajj is part of Islam, but it's not for that individual, right? So in a similar sense, one who lives in a situation where Muslims are a minority has no control over the state powers, over the way in which laws are formed and the way in which the country is governed. So one only might have the dominion over one's own personal activities and affairs, and in that sense, that's the much that one can be responsible for. The Quran says, "La yukallifu Allahu nafsan illa wus'aha." God does not hold a soul responsible except for that which it is capable of. So what you're capable of doing, that's what you're responsible for. You are also responsible for trying to give the message of Islam to other people. And if your message is good, in terms of your own personal conduct and in terms of your words that you speak to others, if people become impressed with what Islam is from your example, then obviously you can have a rippling effect throughout that community. More and more people can become Muslims, embracing that as their own religion until it reaches a certain threshold where the people, for example, form the majority of the society, and they can say, okay, we want the Islamic principles to govern us, and we will give full freedom and rights to the non-Muslims who are a part of the society as well. So then you can have an emerging Islamic state, in which case you will have the responsibility to implement the Islamic State rules as well. In an Islamic state, where the governing powers are Muslims, obviously they do have the responsibility to implement the rules, but two things have happened. One is that many of the ruling powers do not find themselves infused with the Islamic faith. So they might be Muslim in name, but and to a certain extent practicing Islam, but they don't want to go so far. And to an extent, many of us are guilty of that even where we are in our own affairs, because we may have a Muslim parent restricting their youth from following Islam. They may say, okay, we want you to be Muslim, but not that much Muslim. So then, in that case, we are guilty of the same things. So how could we blame others? But what we can do, as Muslims even living in those parts of the world, is to continue to work for da'wah, giving the message of Islam until, again, that society reaches that sort of threshold, which will make them deserving of better leaders. And in fact, people get the leaders that they do deserve. That's one side of it. The other side of it is that what we have made of the Islamic faith and practice over time has been something that when we look at it as a whole, it doesn't seem practical anymore. We have seen, as we look at all of these things, how practical, how